Wonderful to be here this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the film, The Story of Sam King. And I'm Joyce Fraser from the Black Heroes Foundation. I'm very pleased to have meeting with me today is Pastor Michael King, the son of Sam King. And we're just going to be talking around one question, a simple question. And the question is, why? Why? And so if I take that first of all, from the bigger picture, the Black Heroes Foundation, we are all about telling the stories of our heroes. And Sam King was a very important person in the history of Britain. And it's really important that our children know these stories and they know their history. It's also important that the elders are acknowledged for the contribution they've put together for society, and also that we celebrate them. And the third reason is a personal one, because I met Sam King as a child, because he was actually my father's cousin. And I can remember going to Southwark Town Hall when he was made a mayor, and my dad introducing me to him and saying he's a very important person. And me looking up at him because he was very tall and just being amazed. Anyway, so I'm very pleased to have Sam's son with us this afternoon. So Pastor Michael, would you like to talk about why? Why did we need to make this film, The Story of Sam King?
Cousin Joyce, that's an excellent question. And you've mentioned the educational aspect, and you mentioned the benefits to our youth and the acknowledgement of our elders, but it's also a benefit to the indigenous population of Britain. I always remember an African proverb: until the lions have their own historians, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. And it sticks with me in terms of true history. Now, my father's history is an amazing one in that, as you said, he was a mayor of Southwark. He was the first black mayor of Southwark. So the why now goes really into, this is our history and our youth need to know. This is our history and we need to know, our age group. This is our history and it's so positive. The indigenous general population of the UK need to know their historical truths. Then they look at things like Black Lives Matter in a very different perspective, far more positively than some sections of our society are looking at the moment. And it's not only looking positive, there's far more positive actions when we understand the contributions of people like my father, Sam King, to this country and put it in the correct context. Then the other why is the education of our young coming up. If you know who you are, where you're from, the contribution you've made, you have a kind of stomach in, chest out, stand tall, straight back, self-pride, self-acknowledgement in how you then approach life. And our young people aren't told the fullness of the history that goes especially with people of colour and especially with people of Caribbean descent. And it needs to be told because it's such a proud and wonderful history, such a great contributory history. There's a massive why. That why needs to be told to all generations, and that we step up and take our rightful place with pride.
Excellent, thank you very much. So really looking forward to seeing the film now, The Story of Sam King, where you will be starring. So thank you very much, Pastor Mike.
My pleasure, and thank you for giving us the platform, and keep up the good work.
The man who lived here is my hero. He travelled to London on the Windrush, and he had an amazing career, a humble man that came on to be the very first Black Mayor of Southwark. I'm Joyce Fraser from the Black Heroes Foundation, and we're starting a journey to find out more about Sam King. I'm coming to the home of Sam King's son, the Reverend Michael King, and Sam King's granddaughter, Dion. It's the first time I'm coming to their home, and it's quite important to me because they are my relatives. And it's only lately that I found out about this connection. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
I want to find out a lot more about Sam King as a person.
Grandfather and my grandmother.
Wow, good. What a charming young man.
That was their wedding in Camberwell.
Oh, okay.
And
I see 24.
Daddy and Granddad.
Oh, my
Daddy.
The young buck, the young buck.
Yeah.
Sam King was my father's cousin, but I only ever met him once as a young child. So can you tell me a little bit about where Sam was born, about his parents and his parents' parents, if you know?
Father was born in Jamaica. He was born in Portland, parish of Portland in Jamaica. After slavery, a group of slaves got together, and we're talking great-great-great-grandparents got together, and they bought a parcel of land called Egg Hill. And that was an enormous purchase for those days of 1,200 acres. It was a very, very large holding between a number of families, King being one of the prominent families in it. And Dad had to look after the bringing in of a crop, particularly the pimento crop, which was very important to that region. There was a banana crop as well. And he said, son, at 14 or 15, I was hiring and firing men.
So really, he learnt leadership skills from the tender age of 14. In 1944, Sam decided to help Britain fight the Second World War.
When he volunteered for the war, and remember, he volunteered, he wasn't conscripted. In Britain, people were conscripted. This is a guy sitting in rural Jamaica, never been to Britain, but he sees that there's a war and the mother country has need of him. That's what my grandmother said. Son, the mother country has need of you. If you live, it will be a good thing. And she gave her blessing for him to go. Sam was stationed in Britain during the Second World War and served in the RAF, learning many useful skills and making lasting friendships with local people. After World War II, Sam returned to Jamaica. He then came back to the UK, though, on the famous Windrush trip in 1948. I want to find out more about this period in Sam's life. And so I'm going to meet Patrick Vernon, who knew Sam very well during his later years.
England is the place to be, I sail a boat across the sea.
I'm meeting Patrick in Tilbury, where the Windrush docked all those years ago. Look here, how did they feel as they walked along the gangplank, coming off the ship to go into the immigration hall? So Patrick, why is this place of such importance to Sam King?
Well, Sam King would have been amongst other 499 plus passengers that came off the ship, not as glamorous as this one, but they would have walked along here to disembark with his passports to say that we've arrived here to work. He saw the advert, and his father actually sold a couple of animals to raise the money to get his ticket, because he felt that it was his duty to come back to Britain. He wanted a new life, like any migrant would do for any parts of the world, come here. And more importantly, they were invited on the 1948 British Nationality Act. They were invited here because of the devastation of Britain. There was labour shortages. Then there was the creation of the NHS. There were people who were required to work in manufacturing, on the buses, a whole range of jobs. And Sam had that sense of duty because he had served in the Second World War. He liked Britain, and he thought that this was going to be his home for him, and it was his home for the next 60 years.
Even during that voyage, Sam's leadership skills were showing themselves.
They'd stationed someone playing dominoes outside the radio room, so they could hear the radio messages, which were in Morse code, but they're ex-military, so they know what it means. And they'd hear all the news coming in from what was happening in the UK, in Parliament, what was being said and relayed to the ship. And so my father sent out the word, let peace and love reign. Because one of the issues that they learnt was that if there was any trouble on the ship at all, there was another ship shadowing them that then could have intercepted them and sent them back. So let's have peace and love, harmony. Disputes were settled internally, quietly, quickly, without altercation.
When the Windrush docked in the UK, the passengers had to be housed. Some of the accommodation was a little unconventional.
So as you can see here, this is the air vents for Clapham Deep Shelter. And underneath here is a massive tunnel, which was an air raid shelter during the Second World War. So after the Second World War, obviously the shelter was empty, and then along came the Windrush. This was like temporary accommodation of its day. So all the men, and there were mainly men, they lived down here in the deep shelter. I think some of them lived up for an average of about a couple of weeks, if that, and they were able to go daily to Brixton, to the Labour Exchange to find work. Sam didn't live there because he served in the Second World War. He already had contacts and connections with people in Britain and South London, but he did go down quite often because I think he was seen as a kind of a community leader, activist who was able to help some of the men to find accommodation.
There was plenty of work for the Windrush passengers, but Sam wanted a job which suited his skills.
There was an opportunity to do some work in the mechanics, and he did that for a period, and then later joined the post office, whilst at the time still keeping his hands quite heavily involved in sort of political work as well as sort of social justice related work in the community. He did apply to the police force at one point, but he knew as soon as he went there that they would just outright rejected him, despite him quite clearly knowing he aced the exam and things. But it's funny because when he was mayor, the police commissioner came to see him and he ended up doing work with the police force anyway, and him being commended by them. And he always used to kind of have a little chuckle about that because of the fact that he, in the very early days, had applied and had been rejected. And that was the story of most of those from the Caribbean then.
I'm meeting with Dawn Hill today. Dawn is the chair of the Black Cultural Archives and she worked with Sam King.
Oh, hello, Joyce.
Hi,
Welcome. I got to know Sam King when I was at worked for Southwark Social Services Department. You get to know who everybody is, and I heard about Sam King and I thought it was fantastic. He became more well known when the Windrush Foundation started with Arthur Torrington, and they started to build up the information and tell the stories and have events, because he was really quite extraordinary, and he did a lot of work in the community outside of him just being the mayor. He did a lot of work in the community, so he got to be very well known.
One of the important community projects Sam was involved in was the West Indian Gazette, founded in 1958. It was the first UK newspaper for the West Indian community. He worked with Claudia Jones, the paper's founder.
Grandad was the distribution manager for the newspaper at the time. They were around at a very potent time where key things were happening. There was a lot of kind of new ideas and senses of activism and social justice.
The next year, Sam helped Claudia organise the West Indian Carnival at St Pancras Town Hall, the event which laid the foundations for the Notting Hill Carnival.
It wasn't just let's have fun, it was with a key political agenda, which was about we want to bring about a positive image of who we are and what we're about as a community group. We also want to encourage racial harmony. And we want to also be about standing for what's good and what's just. So I think, gosh, we have Carnival today and people see it as, yeah, we're going up there for the music. And I just do you know the grassroots? The liberty you have was built on the principles that birthed what you enjoy as a music, outlet now today.
In his early days in Britain, Sam even had to fight for the right to attend his local church.
When my father first went to the church in Herne Hill, he got to the door and they said to him, are you sure you want to be here? There's somewhere surely in Brixton for you. And he lived in Herne Hill next to Nunnies. They said, this isn't the place you're meant to be, surely down the road would suit you better.
He campaigned for a change in the church law.
This was passed in the synod, along with my father. They passed a law that you cannot stop other Christians using a Christian venue if your venue is available.
Sam became a Labour councillor in Southwark in 1983. Just 6 months later, he was nominated to be mayor.
He came home and said, "May, these silly people are thinking of making me mayor." Because he's saying, "How can I be?" You know, it's a humble guy. And my mother is a great woman. You know, they say behind every great man is a tired woman. And she said, "Sam, you can be anything that you want to be, but you have no ambition." Right? And you see, that's a man who achieved all that he achieved. Yet my mum said, "You don't have ambition," because he's not someone to push himself forward. Yeah. Roles were called on him.
But I must just ask you, were there any issues that your father came across as a mayor?
Well, there were numerous, but just starting with him being mayor, that was a big shock for Britain, because he's the first black mayor in modern day Britain. And he's the first Jamaican to be a mayor outside of Jamaica anywhere in the world. So it created a stir. And in that time, Column 88 and the National Front had said publicly, if he becomes mayor, they will burn down his house and slit his throat. And that made the front page of the Mail Express and another paper, because Dad's response was, if you slit my throat, it doesn't matter, because I'm a Christian, I will go to heaven. But do not burn down my house. It's not a council house. I bought it, I own it. And that made the front page. And they said, look, this man has fought for Queen and country. If the people of Southwark vote him as a mayor, it's their right, and it's his right to respond to that call, because he has fought for, he fought for King and country then. It was King and country. And it made the front page of the papers, then it got in the press, then it went worldwide, and it kind of made a name for Dad.
In 1995, Sam set up the Windrush Foundation with Arthur Torrington in order that the stories of those people who have been so important to Britain could be preserved.
That was very insightful to start that organisation, because if you think of it now, with all the issues that are being raised about Windrush, thank God we've got a Windrush Foundation.
Yeah. Sam King came here as a British subject, like everyone else came from the Caribbean and different parts of the Commonwealth, because they were allowed to, because of the 1948 British Nationality Act. They were classed as British citizens. They could work, they could vote, they could do most things like any indigenous white person in the UK. And then 70 years later, sadly and unironically, the government introduced the hostile immigration environment, which we now call the Windrush scandal, which meant that people, the children, and some of the children may have walked along here, or children they may have had, who came to Britain between 1948 to the 70s, were for some reason by the government were declassified as not being British. People were deported, people lost their jobs, people couldn't get access to NHS treatment, people that went to the Caribbean to visit families and friends were not allowed to come back to Britain.
This is what Sam King was worried about, that the Caribbean community would be lost in the general melee of everything moving on.
If we didn't have the Windrush Foundation with names of people, how would we be able to actually try and deal with the fallout from this immigration policy that we have?
Windrush generations is so lovely together, but after all the pain we've been, the pain we've seen, and after all said and done, justice must be seen and done. So we ask the question, this is question time, who were the nurses and doctors over your head, Prime Minister, and gave you spices to flavor your food, Prime Minister?
When you think about your father, what would you say are his core values that he's passed down to yourself?
If Dad had a job to do, he would do it to the best of his ability. If Dad had a job to do, he would do it with honesty and integrity.
Sam's life reflects the kind of history of struggle, the history of achievement, the history of spirituality.
That is what the story that we want to capture and to be able to tell young people, black and white and brown, of how you can achieve if you actually have a positive mental attitude towards life.
I feel as though I know more about Sam as a person now, and I'm proud to be related to him. This is the end of my journey exploring the story of Sam King. But really, this was the starting of many people's journey as they arrived here on the Windrush. The stories that I've heard have helped me to appreciate just what challenges they faced with regards to prejudice, finding work, finding accommodation. And it's helped me appreciate as well the work of Sam King and how his dedication and determination and faith helped him and the Windrush people to make the amazing achievements that they have made.